The months that followed felt like stepping into a new version of myself, one I had never imagined could exist. After sending that final email to Amelia, I expected silence. I had made peace with it, or at least I told myself I had. But instead of silence, something unexpected happened. My story, the one that had once been buried beneath years of being ignored, began to echo louder than ever. The blog post Ethan encouraged me to share, The Girl Without a Name Tag, had already gained traction online, but it wasn't until a popular digital magazine picked it up that it truly exploded. They ran a full feature titled, The Forgotten Guest Who Found Herself. Ethan's photographs were showcased alongside my words, and for the first time, my name, Lucy Carter, was printed in bold letters beneath the headline. The girl who had been a blank space on a seating chart had become a story the world wanted to hear. At first, I didn't know how to process the attention. Strangers began following my page, leaving comments filled with empathy, gratitude, and admiration. People shared their own stories of being overlooked at family events, workplaces, or friendships. Some wrote to me privately, telling me how my story made them feel less alone. I cried reading those messages, realizing that the pain I had carried for years had somehow transformed into a bridge connecting me to others. For so long, I believed that my invisibility made me worthless, but now it has given my story power. Ethan was the one who helped me navigate it all. We met often, discussing new ideas, new projects. He told me that truth had a ripple effect, that once you speak it, it never stops moving. We decided to continue our collaboration more seriously, creating a storytelling platform that combined his photography with my writing. We called it Unseen Voices. The tagline read, For every person the world forgot. We traveled to nearby towns, capturing portraits and stories of ordinary people whose lives carried extraordinary quiet strength. Widowed mothers running small bakeries, janitors who painted in their spare time, taxi drivers who dreamed of writing poetry. Every face, every story, reminded me of what it meant to truly be seen. Yet amid all the beauty and growth, part of me still wrestled with the ghosts of that wedding. I hadn't spoken to most of my family since that night. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if they ever thought of me, or if their sudden curiosity after my article was just another reflection of their hunger for appearances. That question found its answer one morning when my phone rang, displaying a familiar number. It was Aunt Margaret. "Lucy, dear," she said with exaggerated warmth, her voice sugary and artificial. "I just wanted to tell you how proud we all are of you. Everyone's talking about that article. What a success." I stood in silence for a moment before replying. "Thank you, Aunt Margaret. I didn't expect to hear from you." "Well, of course we had to. You've made quite a name for yourself, haven't you?" She continued, chuckling softly. "Even Amelia mentioned it the other day. She said it's funny how that day turned into something so meaningful for you. I mean, who would have thought?" Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It carried that same faint condescension I'd grown used to. I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Yes, it did turn into something meaningful," I said. "It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes you have to be forgotten before people remember you." She hesitated, sensing the weight in my words. "Well," she said finally, "we should catch up soon. Maybe Sunday dinner? Amelia and her husband are back from their honeymoon. It would be lovely to have you join us." The invitation surprised me. Maybe it was guilt, maybe image maintenance, but part of me wanted to go. Not for them, but for closure. To stand in the same room where I had once felt invisible and realize I no longer needed their validation. I accepted politely. The following weekend, I found myself driving to my aunt's house. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as memories flooded back. The awkward glances, the empty seat card, the laughter that had felt like daggers. But this time was different. I wasn't walking in as the forgotten cousin anymore. I was walking in as someone who had taken her pain and turned it into purpose. When I arrived, Aunt Margaret greeted me at the door, her smile a little too bright. "Lucy, you look wonderful, dear." Her eyes scanned my dress, simple but elegant, one I had bought with money I earned through my writing. Inside, the house was buzzing with chatter. I saw Amelia at the dining table, radiant as ever, surrounded by relatives. When she looked up and saw me, her expression faltered for a moment before settling into a polite smile. "Lucy, I'm so glad you came." Her voice was warm, but there was tension underneath it. I smiled back. "Thanks for inviting me." Dinner began awkwardly. Conversations flowed easily among everyone else, but around me there were pauses, careful, measured silences. It was as if they didn't know how to treat me anymore. I wasn't the quiet, forgettable girl they once overlooked. I was the woman whose story had gone viral, whose voice they had unknowingly pushed into the spotlight. Halfway through the meal, Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "Lucy," he began, "I read your piece online. Quite emotional, really. Though I must say it painted the family in a bit of an unflattering light." The room went still. Amelia shifted uncomfortably while Aunt Margaret forced a smile. "Oh, Robert, don't start," she muttered. But I met his gaze steadily. "It wasn't about anyone in particular," I said softly. "It was about how silence can hurt as much as cruelty. Sometimes people don't realize the weight of being ignored." Amelia spoke up then, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to forget you that day, Lucy. It was all chaos. I didn't even handle the seating chart myself." I nodded. "I know, and maybe that's the point. Sometimes we hurt people not by what we do, but by what we don't notice." She looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, and for the first time I believed she meant it. The tension eased after that. We spoke more naturally, even laughed a little. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As I helped clear the dishes later, Amelia joined me in the kitchen. "You really turned it into something powerful, Lucy," she said. "That story, those pictures, they were haunting and beautiful. I didn't realize how much you were carrying all these years." I smiled gently. "Neither did I, but I'm glad I finally let it out." Before leaving, Aunt Margaret hugged me at the door. "You must come by more often," she said. "You're part of this family no matter what." Driving home, I felt an unexpected peace settle over me. Not because I needed their acceptance, but because I had stopped needing it. I had reclaimed my place in the story, not as the forgotten cousin, but as the woman who found her own light in the shadows. A few weeks later, Ethan called me with news that left me speechless. "Lucy," he said excitedly, "our project's being featured at a gallery downtown. They want to display Unseen Voices, our photographs and stories together." My heart swelled. "Ethan, that's incredible!" He laughed softly. "It's your words that made it happen. You turned pain into art. People see that." The opening night was surreal. The gallery was filled with people moving slowly through the displays, portraits of faces once forgotten, paired with my words printed in elegant black lettering. Near the center of the room was one image larger than the rest. Me, sitting alone under the chandelier. The same picture Ethan had taken that night at Amelia's wedding. Beneath it, engraved on a small silver plaque, were the words, "The girl without a name tag, remembered forever." I stood before it, tears filling my eyes. Ethan joined me quietly, his presence steady beside mine. "You did it," he said softly. "They'll never forget you now." I turned to him and smiled through the tears. "You were the first one who saw me, Ethan. Thank you for that." He shook his head gently. "You just needed a mirror. I was lucky enough to hold it." That night, as I watched people stop in front of my portrait, some pausing, some tearing up, I realized that everything had come full circle. The humiliation, the loneliness, the quiet ache of being unseen, it had all led me here. Being forgotten at that wedding had once felt like the end of something. But now I understood it was only the beginning. Months later, as life continued to unfold beautifully and unpredictably, I received another letter. It was from Amelia. Inside was a photograph of her newborn daughter, along with a short note. "Her name is Lucy. I hope she grows up to be as strong as you." I pressed the letter to my heart and smiled. Maybe life had a strange way of balancing itself, of turning pain into poetry. I framed the letter and placed it on my desk beside the original photograph Ethan had taken, the one that started it all. and sometimes when I looked at it, I whispered softly to myself, "They forgot my name once." But the world remembered my story forever. The next morning after the wedding, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, like a weight I couldn't quite name. I had dreamed of the ballroom, the shimmering chandeliers, the echoing laughter, and the faces that passed by me as if I were invisible. It wasn't the kind of pain that made you cry. It was deeper, duller, the kind that made you quiet. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. No messages. Not a single one from anyone in my family asked if I got home safely or thanked me for coming. It was as if I had never been there. A ghost slipping out of a memory no one cared to keep. I tried to bury myself in work that day. My job at the small local bookstore wasn't glamorous, but it gave me peace. I loved the smell of old paper and the rhythm of the place, the soft bell over the door, the quiet chatter of customers, the sound of pages turning like whispers of forgotten stories. But no matter how much I tried to focus, my thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan, the photographer from the wedding. His voice, calm and warm, echoed in my mind. "You just haven't been seen properly yet." It was strange how a single sentence from a stranger could linger longer than the voices of people I had known my whole life. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that he was just being kind. Still, part of me wondered if he really meant it. A few days passed before I heard from him. It was late one night when my phone buzzed with a new email notification. My heart jumped when I saw the sender, Ethan Cole Photography. The subject line read, "The Forgotten Guest." My pulse quickened. I opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a short message. "You told me no one ever really saw you. I hope these photos prove otherwise." Ethan below his message were several attached images. My hands trembled as I clicked through them. The first was of me standing by the terrace railing, the night sky behind me, my eyes distant but calm. The second showed me sitting alone at the corner table, surrounded by laughter and lights that didn't quite touch me. There was one of me glancing over my shoulder, my expression unreadable, half defiant, half hurt. But then there was one that made my breath catch, a candid shot of me laughing. I didn't even remember laughing that night. My eyes were bright, my head slightly tilted back, the kind of smile that came from being genuinely seen. I stared at that photo for a long time. It didn't look like the version of me I saw in mirrors, the tired one, the one that blended into crowds. This one looked alive, real. I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Confidence. The next day I replied to his email, "Ethan, these are beautiful. I don't know how you did it, but you made me see myself differently." "Thank you," he responded within minutes. "It's easy to photograph honesty. You wear it without realizing." From then on, we started talking more. At first, it was just about photography, how he started, what inspired him. But slowly, our conversations deepened. He told me he used to work for a big agency but left because he hated the fake smiles and staged perfection. He wanted to capture the truth. I told him about my writing, how I kept journals filled with thoughts I never shared. Stories about people who felt unseen, forgotten, left behind. He asked if I'd ever thought of publishing them. I laughed at the idea. "Who would care about my words?" I said. He replied simply, "I do." That was how it began. Our quiet friendship, born from an email and a handful of photographs. Weeks passed, and life settled back into its usual rhythm, except it wasn't quite the same. Ethan and I started meeting on weekends, sometimes at coffee shops, sometimes in parks. He'd bring his camera and I'd bring my notebook. He'd photograph strangers. I'd write their imagined stories. It became our ritual, his lens and my words capturing the world from two perspectives that somehow always met in the middle. One afternoon, while we sat by the riverbank, he looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You know, you could tell your story, the one about the wedding." I frowned. "What story?" "It was just another reminder that I don't belong anywhere." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that. There's something powerful in being forgotten. You found meaning in it. You turned pain into strength. That's a story people need. I didn't answer right away. But that night, when I got home, his words wouldn't leave me alone. I opened my laptop and began to write. I called it The Girl Without a Name Tag. The words flowed like a confession. I wrote about walking into the ballroom, about the empty seat card labeled guest, about the humiliation and the quiet kindness of a stranger with a camera. By the time I finished, tears blurred my vision. It wasn't just a story, it was a release. I sent it to Ethan, not expecting much. The next morning he replied, "Lucy, it's beautiful. You need to share this. People will see themselves in it." I hesitated. But after some convincing, I posted it anonymously on a blog platform, along with one of Ethan's photos, the one of me under the chandelier light, looking both lost and found. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but within days it spread. Comments poured in from people all over the world. This is my story too. I felt this in my soul. I've been the forgotten one at every table. For the first time in my life, my pain had purpose. The thing that once made me feel small was now connecting me to strangers who understood. A week later, I met Ethan again at the same riverbank. He grinned as he held up his phone. "You're viral, you know that? Thousands of shares, hundreds of messages." I laughed, stunned. "That's impossible." "It's not," he said, his eyes warm. "You spoke truth. People recognize truth when they see it." I didn't know how to thank him. Without him, I would have stayed invisible. But before I could say anything, his expression turned serious. "Lucy," he began, "you don't owe them anything. Not your pain, not your forgiveness. But if you're ever ready, maybe your story deserves to be heard by the ones who ignored you too." His words unsettled me. The thought of my family reading my story made my stomach twist. They'd probably laugh or pretend not to care. But part of me wondered, would they recognize themselves in my words? Would they realize what they had done? I didn't act on it right away. Instead, I threw myself deeper into my collaboration with Ethan. Together, we started a small project called Faces of the Unseen. He'd photograph people who felt overlooked: street vendors, janitors, single mothers, elderly shopkeepers. And I'd write their stories. The response was overwhelming. Every person we met had a story that deserved to be remembered. And through their faces, I saw reflections of my own pain slowly healing. But no matter how far I moved forward, the ghost of that wedding still haunted me. Every time I saw families hugging during our photo sessions, a pang of bitterness returned. I told Ethan about it one evening as we sat watching the sunset. "It's strange," I said quietly. "I've forgiven them in my head, but my heart still aches." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's just choosing to live beyond the memory." I looked at him, feeling something deeper stir in my chest, something more than gratitude. His presence had become an anchor in my drifting life. He saw me when no one else did, and that kind of seeing changed everything. One day, a message appeared in my inbox that made my heart stop. It was from Amelia. "Lucy, I came across an article online. It had your story. The photos looked familiar. Was that really about our wedding?" I didn't reply immediately. My hands trembled as I read it again. She wasn't angry, just confused, maybe even curious. Ethan noticed my silence when we met later that day. "You okay?" he asked gently. I handed him my phone. He read the message, then looked at me with calm certainty. "It's up to you how this ends, Lucy. You can ignore it. Or you can take back your voice." That night, I sat by my window, staring at the city lights. I thought about that forgotten name tag, about the emptiness I felt in that ballroom, about how far I'd come since then. Slowly, I typed my reply. "Yes, Amelia. It was about that day. I wrote it because I needed to remember who I was when everyone else forgot. I don't blame anyone. I just hope you understand how much silence can hurt." I hesitated before pressing send, but once I did, I felt lighter. Whatever came next didn't matter. I had spoken my truth. Before going to bed, I checked my inbox one last time. Another email from Ethan waited for me. It said, "You did it. You faced them, not with anger, but with grace. I'm proud of you, Lucy." I smiled, tears tears welling in my eyes. That night, for the first time, I slept peacefully. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this much. I wasn't the forgotten guest anymore. I was the author of my own story. And the man behind the camera, the one who remembered me when no one else did, had helped me find my light again. I was so shocked when I walked into my cousin's wedding and realized everyone knew my name, except my own family. The only person who remembered me that night was the photographer, and he changed everything. I walked into the grand ballroom feeling a strange mixture of nostalgia and unease. The air smelled of lilies and expensive champagne, and the glimmer of crystal chandeliers reflected across the marble floor like scattered stars. My cousin Amelia's wedding was the kind of event people would talk about for weeks. Grand, flawless, and filled with the kind of guests who wore pride like jewelry. Everyone seemed to fit perfectly into this scene of celebration, their laughter ringing with belonging. Everyone except me. As I stood at the entrance, clutching my small silver clutch with both hands, I could already sense it. The subtle distance, the polite glances, the unspoken question in people's eyes. What is she doing here? The invitation had come late, weeks after everyone else had received theirs. It was delivered by regular mail, no gold lettering, no personal note. Just a generic card with my name scrawled awkwardly at the bottom. I almost didn't go. I had told myself I didn't care, that I didn't need to be part of their world anymore. But curiosity, or maybe the foolish hope of being remembered, won out. So here I was wearing the only decent dress I owned, a soft blue satin piece I'd bought on sale, standing in a place that made me feel smaller with every passing second. The first person I saw was Aunt Margaret, Amelia's mother. She looked stunning in emerald green, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile bright for every guest. When her eyes met mine, her expression flickered with polite confusion. "Oh, hello," she said, tilting her head. "And you are?" The words cut deeper than I expected. I forced a small smile. "Lucy," I murmured, my voice barely steady. "Your niece." Her eyes widened slightly, realization dawning with embarrassment. "Oh, of course, Lucy, it's been years, hasn't it? You've grown so much." She chuckled awkwardly before being whisked away by another guest. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to walk further in, pretending not to notice the sideways glances. I passed the seating chart, beautiful ivory paper with gold calligraphy. I scanned for my name. Amelia, Margaret, Robert, Aunt Carol, Uncle James. My eyes darted faster, panic rising when I reached the end. My name wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I checked again, slower this time, thinking maybe I had missed it. Nothing. At the very bottom, in tiny letters, was a blank space labeled simply guest. My hands trembled as I traced the space. That was me, the nameless guest. I turned to the event coordinator, a young woman in a headset. "Excuse me," I began softly. "I think there's been a mistake. My name isn't on the list." She glanced at the chart, then at me. "Oh, right. Maybe you were added last minute? You can just sit anywhere, sweetheart." She smiled quickly before walking away, already attending to someone more important. Sit anywhere. As if I were invisible, as if belonging was optional for people like me. I found a table near the far corner of the ballroom, half hidden by a floral arrangement. The people seated there were distant relatives, older and uninterested. I smiled politely, but no one acknowledged me. One of them asked another, "Who's she with?" I heard the whisper, the tone sharp with dismissal. "Probably a friend of the groom," someone replied. I wanted to correct them, to say I'm family, but the words stayed locked behind my lips. Dinner was served, and laughter filled the room. Toasts were made, champagne glasses clinked, and the air pulsed with celebration. Amelia looked radiant, her white gown glittering as she danced with her new husband. Everyone cheered as they kissed under a shower of rose petals. I clapped quietly, pretending to enjoy myself. But each sound, each smile around me only deepened the ache in my chest. They had forgotten me, completely, effortlessly. I was a ghost in the family photo of their happiness. As I sat there, I remembered the summers we used to spend together, Amelia and I, running through the gardens at Grandma's house, sharing secrets, braiding each other's hair. She used to call me her sister. But when my parents died in a car accident, the family's warmth disappeared too. Aunt Margaret said she'd do what she could, but what she could do, it turned out, was nothing. I was left to fend for myself, living with neighbors until I turned 18. From then on, I never expected anything from them again, until now. I guess part of me had hoped someone, anyone, would still care enough to say, "It's good to see you, Lucy." I excused myself after dinner and walked toward the terrace to escape the noise. The cool air hit my face, and I breathed deeply. The night sky stretched above, vast and indifferent. From where I stood, I could still hear the music, soft, romantic, mocking. That's when I noticed someone standing a few feet away, adjusting a camera on a tripod. The wedding photographer. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes that seemed to take in everything. He caught my gaze and smiled faintly. "You look like you needed a break," he said, his voice calm. I managed a weak laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who notices details," he replied, lifting his camera slightly. "Mind if I take a picture?" I blinked, startled. "Of me? Why?" He shrugged. "You look real. Everyone inside is posing. You're the only one just being." His words startled me more than the request. I hesitated, but something in his tone, gentle, sincere, made me nod. I leaned slightly against the railing, unsure what to do. The flash clicked once, then again. He looked at the screen and smiled. "Perfect." I felt strangely self-conscious. "I'm not really photogenic." He shook his head. "That's not true. You just haven't been seen properly yet." The words lingered in the air, wrapping around me like warmth. For the first time that night, I felt visible. Not because I demanded attention, but because someone had simply chosen to notice me. We talked for a while. His name was Ethan. He wasn't just some hired photographer. He was passionate about storytelling, about capturing moments that revealed truth instead of perfection. He said weddings fascinated him because they showed both the joy and the pain hiding underneath them. When I laughed softly at that, he smiled. "See, that's the picture I wanted," he said, snapping another shot before I could react. As I returned inside later, something in me shifted. I still felt out of place, but not entirely invisible. Ethan's kindness had cracked something open, a reminder that maybe being forgotten by people who never really cared wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. Maybe it was freedom. Still, the humiliation wasn't over. When the time came for the family photo, everyone gathered near the stage. "Family only," the photographer's assistant called. I hesitated, unsure whether to join. Aunt Margaret caught my eye and gave me a polite, almost apologetic smile, then looked away. My heart thudded painfully. Amelia waved her bridesmaids closer, but didn't look in my direction. I stood still until someone behind me whispered, "You're blocking the shot, miss." "Sorry," I murmured, stepping aside. I watched as the flashes went off. Smiles, hugs, unity, all the things I once thought family meant. I turned to leave, but then Ethan lifted his camera and took another photo of me. "Don't go yet," he said quietly. "One more." He didn't pose me or ask me to smile. He just captured the moment, the raw, silent ache of someone on the edge of belonging. When the flash faded, I whispered, "You shouldn't waste your film on me." He lowered the camera. "Trust me," he said softly. "You're the only one I won't forget." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that one person seeing me was enough to heal the ache left by so many who didn't. As I left the ballroom that night, the laughter behind me felt distant, like it belonged to another world. I walked to my car under the glow of the streetlights, my heels clicking softly on the pavement. The night air carried faint traces of music from the hall, mingling with the hum of crickets. I looked back once before unlocking my door. Through the windows, I could see them all dancing, celebrating, glowing in the warmth of their shared memories. And then my eyes caught Ethan's. He was standing near the doorway, camera hanging from his shoulder, watching me go. He lifted a hand in a quiet goodbye. I smiled faintly before driving away. On the way home, tears slipped down my cheeks without warning. They weren't tears of sadness alone, they were of release. Because for the first time in a long while, I realized that being forgotten didn't erase who I was. It only freed me from needing their approval. And though the night had begun with humiliation, it ended with something fragile yet powerful: hope. I didn't know it then, but that night would become the turning point of my life. The night when the forgotten guest began to remember herself